Welcome to the Midnight Dreary, your rest stop on the highway of the unexplained. Pull up a bar stool and grab a drink as we present tonight's episode. And here's your host, Justin Wood.
Welcome back, you guys, here at the Midnight Dreary, your rest stop on the highway of the unexplained. We're having a birthday this month, 1 year old here at the Midnight Dreary, and thank you guys for your continuous support, your continual downloads, the emails. It's really appreciated. It really has been overwhelming, to say the least. You know, my intent originally was to do a small podcast, more seasonal for September, October, and going into November, our spooky months, October being the spookiest of those. But really, it's been flattering that you guys have had such an overwhelming response to the first 5 that we did. I will continue to push out more, and if things go well, we may be here for the long haul. So if you do have any show ideas, by all means, email those over to me, themidnightdreary@yahoo.com. We're easing into spooky season right now. September doesn't feel like it. I know for you guys out there across the lovely United States, it has been a hot, sickly, miserable, humid summer. Man, we can't catch a break. It has been terrible. Down here in the deep south, man, it has been a rough go. So I am ready to usher in that fall, Halloween, bonfire, football, trick-or-treating, s'mores, all that weather, which usually means a cooler season and a much more enjoyable time outside. And speaking of what a year it's been, besides the heat of this summer, it's been a good one for me. And one thing that I've done this year, and I always like to pass on to you guys, are book recommendations that I've had. Earlier this year, I actually listened to the audiobook The Wilderness Hunter by President Teddy Roosevelt. This was published back in 1893. And before it was an audiobook, guess what, guys? It was a real book where you may have to go to the library and get those. Do people even read as much as they used to? I digress. What drew me to this book, and I think you guys will like this, Teddy Roosevelt, obviously the president, but had a really colorful, impressive resume, very involved in the wilderness, the outdoors. And he had heard a story about this old man that was a mountain man named Bowman. Grizzled, weather-beaten is how he described him. In an encounter with an ape man he had in the wilderness of the Pacific Northwest when he was a young hunter. So Teddy Roosevelt had heard this and thought it was substantial enough to put in his book. I will tell you, before I get deeply into recommending the book, I was thrilled because I thought that was going to be a huge part of the whole book. It was not. I think it finally came up in the 20th chapter, but everything else was really, really incredible too. It was more of an outdoorsy hunting journal that Teddy Roosevelt had written. But really cool book, and really, when you hear about a president writing about an ape-man encounter, that's kind of weird. Makes you scratch your head a bit. I know Jimmy Carter filed a UFO report back in the 60s or 70s. I'd have to look that up. So we've got a couple of presidents who have had some spooky encounters with either aliens or cryptids, or they're just making shit up. Hopefully not the latter. But speaking of the government and alien encounters, and also the summer, I went on a rant about that. What about this summer? The House subcommittee having a whole discussion, unidentified anomalous phenomena, implications on national security, public safety, and government transparency. So a subcommittee hearing talking about UAPs, we could just say UFOs, and a whole discussion involved mostly coming from retired Major David Grush. And the video is online. You can watch this. This is straight from the subcommittee talking. And he alleges that the U.S. had retrieved non-human biological matter from crafts that they believe that have crashed. But it's so strange to me that the government is actually a lot more forward with these discussions. Now, I think some people have taken these headlines and say, well, the government admits their existence. They're using cautious language here. I don't want to say to skirt around, probably not to drive paranoia to all Americans, but it's also to probably, they don't want to tell you what they have, but most people may not even know if they have something or if it even exists out there. I don't trust the government with keeping secrets, but if you're really interested in that, go back. If you missed that in July, headline, U.S. recovered non-human biologics from UFO crash sites, former intel official says. So he's saying that they're in possession of debris and possibly, what would that be, biological matter from maybe an alien or a creature from another universe that has been there. So really interesting to watch. And there's been other high-level officials, especially some of our military pilots, who have said, Commander David Fravor, Ryan Graves, who have alleged they've had encounters with aircraft of unexplained origin. And there's some videos supporting that. So it's been an interesting year, to say the least. And with that said, we're going to go into our topic tonight, which is one of my favorite stories, scary, alien, ghost or not, the Pascagoula Alien Abduction. On the evening of October 11th, 1973, 42-year-old Charles Hickson and 19-year-old Calvin Parker walked into the Jackson County Sheriff's Office with an otherworldly story about the strange, terrifying event that just happened to them moments before. Both Hickson and Parker worked together at the Wagner Shipyard in Pascagoula, Mississippi. Pascagoula is a city on the coast of the Gulf of Mexico, only a couple of miles from the Alabama state line, and after their shift had ended, the older Hickson asked Parker if he would like to go fishing with him. The men tried fishing in one location, but the swarming bugs prompted them to head back to the shipyard, where there were fewer lights to attract insects. Parker pointed out posted signs to Hickson when they pulled up, but Hickson brushed off his concerns about breaking the law. "That don't mean nothing. I fish here all the time." I hope that's what he sounded like. That's my impression of him. They walked down to the old pier, cast out their lines, and waited for a bite. I distinctly remember I was looking at a boat across. It was an old oar boat that they do the weather with, and it was made out of steel. And I was thinking to myself, now how does something made out of steel float? Parker recalled. That's where my mind was, and that's when I noticed the blue hazy lights coming in from behind. You could see the reflection across the water. Thinking the lights were the police, he turned to Hickson and said, "Charlie, we're in trouble. You lied to me and we're fixing to go to jail." When the men stood up and turned around, they said they didn't see police cars, but instead a long, ovular craft floating around 2 feet from the ground, emitting a blindingly bright light. Estimated size was 30 to 40 feet across and 8 to 10 feet high. There were 3 bulky-looking creatures. I still don't know what they were. They were coming towards us, Parker said. By the time they got to us, I still couldn't see, for the light was so bright. He described 2 of the creatures grabbing Hickson and 1 grabbing him. And that's when it carried me aboard the craft. Parker said the creatures stopped at the door and injected him with a shot that resulted in him being relaxed. Earlier reports stated that the younger Parker fainted at the sight of the strange creatures. All right, let's break this down before we get into what happens aboard, what happens after. Set the story up. These 2 gentlemen are working in Pascagoula, Mississippi. They work at a shipyard. Charles Parker and, Calvin Parker and Charles Hickson. 42-year-old Charles Hickson, 19-year-old Calvin Parker. This is 50 years ago this year, and so they're fishing outside of the shipyard. Pascagoula, if you do not know, is on the coast, right by the Gulf of Mexico. So lots of water, lots of waterways to fish in, and that's what they were doing in the night after their shift. All right, so they're looking around. They finally find a spot. The younger Calvin Parker is concerned that they may get pulled over by cops, and he sees a blue light, and he believes it's cop cars, but it's not. He estimated that they're seeing a craft that's 40 feet across and 8 to 10 feet high, so that's pretty substantial size. And then there's 3 creatures they said were coming out towards them. Now, if you go online and look at these, the drawing of these creatures are pretty creepy looking. Looks like they have a carrot or some type of weird pointy long appendage for a nose. And he says, Hickson and Parker describe the creatures as 6 foot tall, robotic humanoids with gray elephant-like skin, bullet-shaped heads, slit-shaped mouths, and crab-like pinchers. They had the ability to levitate and hovered just above the ground. All right, we're getting back into the story, but here we are, Pascagoula at night. A 42-year-old and a 19-year-old. They're ready to fish. They're ready to catch some fish in the waterways, and aliens just interrupt the party. It takes 2 to get Mr. Hickson in. 1 grabs Calvin. Completely paralyzed but still conscious, the 2 men were subjected to a medical exam by a giant robotic eye. They were then returned to shore, and the craft sped away. Hickson and Parker promptly reported the incident to Keesler Air Force Base and the Jackson County Sheriff's Department. A secretly made audio recording revealed that they were traumatized, worried about their families, and had no intentions of deceiving anyone. Hickson reportedly passed a polygraph examination. Dr. J. Allen Hynek, professor of astronomy at Northwestern University, studied the case and concluded, "There is no question in my mind that these men had a very real, frightening experience." This is why I like this story so much. These guys, by all accounts, skeptics and believers and anyone in the middle, just trying to flesh out the facts, there's no doubt they were terrified by what happened. They truly believed something happened to them, whether it occurred how their story is or not. Something occurred that caused them to be extremely frightened and terrified. So what happens next? This is what I think really lends some credence to this story. They're interviewed by Sheriff Diamond, and what happens is he activates a hidden recorder in his office, right? They're obviously not aware of that, but he leaves the men alone, and they actually record what these 2 are saying. Now, you would think that if it's a plan of some sort, Mr. Hickson and Mr. Parker are going to realize the sheriff's out of the room and say, "Hey, we're fooled them," right? That's not what happened. Let's read a little more about it. Sheriff Diamond asked Charlie to come back in the morning to make a complete statement. Charlie said he didn't want any publicity and he didn't want to get his family upset. Then Diamond and Captain Ryder went out and left the 2 men alone in the room with the tape recorder still recording. Charlie's voice was shaky as he said to Calvin, "I can't take much more of that." And Calvin sounded frantic. "Calvin, I got to get home and get to bed or get some nerve pills or see the doctor or something. I can't stand it. I'm about to go half crazy." Charlie, "I tell you, when we get through, I'll get you something to settle you down so you can get some damn sleep." Calvin, "I can't sleep yet like it is. I'm just damn near crazy." Charlie, "Well, Calvin, when they brought you out, when they brought me out of that thing, God damn it, it's like never in hell I got you straightened out." His voice rising, Calvin said, my damn arms, my arms. I remember how they just froze up and I couldn't move, just like I stepped on a damn rattlesnake." "They didn't do me that way," sighed Charlie. Now both men were talking as if to themselves. Calvin, I passed out. I expect I never passed out in my whole life." Charlie, "I've never seen nothing like that before in my life. You can't make people believe." Calvin, "I don't want to keep sitting here. I want to see a doctor." Charlie, "They better wake up and start believing. They better start believing." Calvin, "You see how that damn door come right up?" Listen, sidebar by the host. I think that's such a creepy line right there. You see how that damn door come right up. It seems so subtle, but some weird little nuance like that where he's talking about how the door opened up. You know, saying that privately, being recorded, that type of detail, it just doesn't seem someone would say something like that unless they saw it's a door. Doors typically don't open up too unusual. They swing or they roll up. They may lift, but when he notices how the door comes up, when I first read this, that's what chilled me. Back to it. Charlie, I don't know how it opened, son. I just don't know. Calvin, it just laid up, and just like that, those sons of bitches, just like that, they come out. Charlie, I know. You can't believe it. You can't make people believe it. Calvin, I paralyzed right then. I couldn't move. Charlie, they won't believe it. They gonna believe it one of these days. Might be too late. I knew all along there was people from other worlds up there. I knew all along. I never thought it would happen to me. Calvin, you know yourself I don't drink. Charlie, I know that, son. When I get to the house, I'm gonna get me another drink, make me sleep. Look what we sitting around for. I gotta tell Blanche. What are we waiting for? Calvin, and panicky. I gotta go to the house. I'm getting sick. I gotta get out of here. And then Charlie got up and left the room, and Calvin was alone. Calvin, it's hard to believe. Oh God, it's awful. I know there's a God up there. His words as he prayed became inaudible. All right, so lots to this story, lots to unpack. They were fishing. They were apparently abducted by aliens. And now they go to the sheriff's office in the early morning, late at night, to report this. And the sheriff activates a secret recorder. And what they get on the recorder probably surprised anybody who listened to that afterwards, because these two guys weren't concocting a plan. They're seriously concerned. They seriously think they've seen something. Maybe they did. From another world. So I've always thought that was really, really interesting. Especially Calvin Parker, how panicky he is. And again, that level of detail, talking about how the door opens, just a really, really strange, something just really strange about that, saying that. It just doesn't seem like something someone would make up. That's creepy. So a sidebar on this, I actually spoke with one of the, a resident of Pascagoula who operates a business on Main Street. I don't want to give her name out there. She didn't say whether or not, but I asked, she's a lifelong resident of Pascagoula. I asked about this story. She was really aware of it. She knew that a lot of people had kind of poked fun of it for years, but she said residents tended to believe them. Calvin Parker is still alive. He's older now. Obviously, Charles Hickson has passed away for quite some time. But she said most people do believe this story. I had asked if the original audio was still available somewhere, and she said she thought it was, but she did not know where. And I couldn't find it online. I did read a note that they still have it. It's available to listen to down at the sheriff's office down there. Now, if you want to call the sheriff's office and ask to listen to an old audio recording from 50 years ago of two guys that thought they were abducted by aliens, I encourage it. I don't know if a small-time podcaster can get away with those questions. They may be welcoming. Maybe I'll reach out and see what we can do. But it's out there somewhere, and this was the transcript that I found. So let's go back, rehash before we get into our next part. What makes this story substantial? They're fishing after work, 42, 19 years old. Blue lights, three guys, creatures, come out. They look weird, elephant skin, pop them in the craft, and they're getting panicky. All right? They have a giant eye, look them over, and once this occurs, drop them back off where they were, and then they go report to the sheriff, go inside, they're secretly recorded, and they're freaking the fuck out. They are freaking out about this, okay? So it's not a good night for them. So 50 years later almost, a new witness comes forward. Now, how strange does this get? On the same night, October 1973, not far from where the marker is going to be placed on the bank of the river, there's going to be a marker that commemorates this occasion placed on there, and this is a news story that I got down there. Maria Blair was waiting with her husband, Jerry Blair. She was waiting for him to leave a boat because he worked offshore, and she saw something that she's telling for the first time. It was a warm night. It was about 73 degrees, and it was kind of easy to just sit in the car and wait for the captain to get there. While they were waiting, Jerry went to sleep, and Maria saw what she describes as strange, a blue light streaking back and forth. So, let me correct that. He's waiting to leave on a boat for work, so they're waiting for the boat captain to get there. And this witness says she sees a blue light streaking back and forth. You're looking up at the sky, looking at the stars, the Big Dipper and things, and that's when I saw it rise up in the sky, Blair said. Where I saw it come up, the blue light was just right over where they were abducted. At the time, she thought it was a plane or helicopter. We hear this loud water, just something fell in the water. It was a loud splash. The water was just rippling, and when I looked down, that's when it looked like a person in the water. I was looking just right below me. Blair still doesn't know what she saw in the water and didn't think much of it until the next day when she heard about Parker and Hickson and what they had told the Jackson County Sheriff Department. I was watching 2 men being abducted by a UFO, she said. Despite believing what she saw as a UFO, she never talked about it to anyone except her family. Blair's husband wanted to keep it quiet. When she would talk about it, I would tell her to shut up. People are going to think you're crazy, said Jerry Blair. Old Jerry Blair, never one to mince words, it doesn't sound like. What was it? When she would talk about it, I would tell her to shut up. People are going to think you're crazy. Jerry just wanted that simple life on the boat and away from the alien controversy. After seeing the recent media report about the abduction, Blair got the courage to come forward. She said her motivation was to give Calvin Parker and Charles Hickson's story some validation. So she had probably, and forgive me, let me go back on the news story. She had seen that they were going to put a tourist marker down at the site, and knowing what she had seen, she came forward with her story. But guess what? Another witness comes forward. Later that evening, Judy Branning was sitting in a car a few miles away at a traffic signal with her roommate and their dates. We were on a double date that night, Branning said. We were at a red light at Chicago and Highway 90. Okay, so that's the cross streets. And we're basically sitting on the railroad track. I saw some lights, and I wasn't sure what I was looking at because it was so far away. Like the Blairs, Branning thought it was an airplane at first, but as it came closer and flew over the car she was in, the four realized it wasn't. It didn't make noise, Branning said. It had bright lights. It got closer and it was hovering. It was kind of saucer-shaped or dish-shaped with a rounded top. The radio sounded like it was running through all the stations and the car went dead. We were freaking out. Branning said after it passed over the car, the craft shot straight up at a rate of speed she'd never seen and disappeared. It left her shaken. I didn't sleep that night thinking about it, Branning said. When I saw what Calvin and Charles went through, I kind of backed down. Branning said the four agreed not to say anything about what they saw. She said over the years she told a few people, but not too many people because she was scared of people's reactions. Now 74 years old, she says she does not care if people believe her or not. So, we've got 2 witnesses now. And one thing, I think a lot of people will critique the witnesses saying, if it happened, why didn't they come forward back then? And I will say I can see both sides of it. One, this is the 1970s. It's small town or small city, Mississippi, a blue-collar town. This is not out there. This is not the social media age. This is, I don't want to paint with a broad brush here, but you might get put in an asylum or really criticized if you're saying you saw UFOs. People are not going to believe this. This is probably a very strong religious community. And so I can see why people aren't going to say that they saw this. I can see, they're probably also going to convince themselves they saw a blue light. It was strange, but they can't figure out what it was. On the other hand, at the same time, it's a little strange that several people are saying the same thing, that we just didn't say anything back then, and now they're coming back. You don't want them to look through a lens of too much time has elapsed because it's so far away from the actual incidents. You don't want them to have a memory that's not as accurate. They've heard the story over and over again, and maybe their mind's adopting some of the details from newer stories, and they're kind of placing it in there. Don't want to say false memories, but maybe it's embellished it a bit. So, but wait. We have yet another witness. Rosie Nail of Moss Point is also unhappy with the report. Nell was hundreds of miles away from Pascagoula that night, and that Hickson and Parker said they were abducted, but she says she witnessed something that was not from this world as well. Rosie Nell of Moss Point, Mississippi, said she saw glowing orbs in the skies the same night in 1973, the same night that the Mississippians Calvin Parker and Charles Hickson alleged the alien abduction. Nell, who was northeast of Grenada in the town of Bruce, says she saw a light moving across the sky that night and separated into two lights. One orb moved closer to her and became as large as the sun and began changing colors. Then rejoined the other object and shot out of sight. It was an event she said isn't explained by any possibilities in the report that she had read. It was otherworldly, whatever that encompasses, Nell said. It was purposeful. It maneuvered, it went up and down, it went sideways, and it shot up in the sky. I don't think it's military of any country. I think with technology advances, they would know if it was from other countries. Whatever the truth is, I think we should know about it. All right, so you have 3 witnesses who've come forward. You have 2 gentlemen who work at the shipyard who are scared to death. And you have a recording from the police department that confirms, at least I think is reasonable to say, they had an experience that scared the hell out of them. Whatever that experience was, it happened to them, and they're terrified. And they're praying, and they want to go home, and they want medicine or liquor to get it away. They want to forget this. All right, so pretty convincing, right? Well, let's play devil's advocate and let's look at some discrepancies, and then I want to know what you guys think. It's important here at the Midnight Dreary that we just don't take everything at face value, no matter how sexy the story is. What a great story. We have witnesses. We have an audio recording. Both of the gentlemen wrote books about the incident. And forgive me, too, rest in peace to Mr. Parker. As I was recording this and doing my notes, I pulled up the recent story. He had passed away about 2 weeks ago, and so that late August 2023. So rest in peace to Mr. Parker. Mr. Hickson had passed away back in 2011. But let's be honest about this, and let's, again, devil's advocate. All right, one thing that changed from time to time was Calvin Parker's side of the story. It wasn't always consistent. The consensus was that it was 3 aliens, and he passed out. But at times he mentioned a woman alien, right? There's later reports that he said that he had seen a woman alien on the trip. She was never in the original report. So why did he add this? Was it because he was getting media attention? Could be. But there was something to that. And in later reports, that doesn't come up. So it changed. And then it also changed that if he saw a woman alien, did he pass out or did he not? What happened? He obviously had seen enough to describe the craft itself, to describe the creatures, consistent with Charles Hickson's. But then he passed out, but then he's back to awake. But so he does have some discrepancies that the story changed here and there. All right. Charles Hickson also, over the years, he did several media reports and television programs. He mentioned he would continue to see aliens later down the line, and he also refused a polygraph that was to be conducted by an experienced examiner. So Philip J. Klass, the UFO skeptic, concluded it was a hoax based on that. I don't think throwing the baby out with the bathwater because he wouldn't take a polygraph exam, it necessarily is a hoax. Earlier reports show that they did take a polygraph and passed, but it was criticized that the examiner was just out of, where do you go to school for that, polygraph school? He was new, and there were questions, did he read it correctly? But to be fair, if they passed and then they're continually asked to do it, I don't feel like they should have to do it again, but at the same time, to provide credibility, maybe they should. So that's one criticism. I do think Philip Klass kind of, again, baby bathwater. Oh, he's not going to take another polygraph. It's a hoax. I think that's a damning comment saying hoax. But again, I think all the other things that come up, the changing of the story a little bit, okay, I'll take this many, but I'm not taking another one. And it does say Hickson later altered and embellished some of his claims. Skeptical investigator Joe Nickel concluded that he thinks they may have fantasized a hypnagogic waking dream state and suggested Calvin Parker's corroboration of the tale was likely due to suggestibility because he initially told police he had passed out at the beginning of the incident and failed to regain consciousness until it was over. So, yeah, there's always going to be something strange about this where, it's hard to see I think you go back to the date it happened. I think over time, they're going to get media attention. And listen, some people may be different than me, but these guys, I don't disagree with what they were doing. Parker, it says, later attended UFO conventions. 1993, he started a company called UFO Investigations to produce television stories about UFOs. This is 20 years after it happened. And then 10 years after it happened, he published a book. That was Charles Hickson. If the event really happened, and if that's that substantial, this was what I was saying with myself, I don't see a problem trying to profit off of it, unless in those profits you're lying about it. Now, if they're continually embellishing the story, or they're really trying to get more out of it, and that could be likely, then yeah, you know what, you're going to lose credibility about it. Following the incident, it says, Charles Hickson gave interviews, multiple of them, and lectures. He appeared on television series, including a episode of the game show To Tell the Truth. And so, they probably made more out of it. And this was the recent, prior to his passing, I know in the past year or two, Calvin Parker, when they released the plaque down there, he had wrote another book. It's available on Amazon. Let me go ahead and pull that up for you guys so you guys can read his version and his account as well for yourself. And it would be the last one, Pascagoula. The story continues, new evidence and new witnesses, also as an audio book for $14.95 and a hardcover. He's talking about in the book that there's some transcripts of hypnosis sessions that took place with Charles Hickson, some hypnosis sessions with some of the witnesses that have come forward. And he also had Pascagoula, the closest encounter, my story. I believe these are two different books. I think maybe he added to it. The story continues, yeah. And that is Calvin Parker's. That one's also the same price. It's interesting. It really is. And I think that, like I said, I don't have an issue with them making money off of it. He says in one of his final interviews that if you buy the book, all of the details, all the stories are in there. Okay? There's nothing that he added, took away, filtered, and he swears by it, and he's going to stand by it. Rest in peace, Mr. Parker. The plaque is down there off the highway where that took place, near the bridge in the shipyard in Pascagoula, Mississippi. So if you're ever down that way and want to read the story on a travel memorial plaque, it is down there. So what do you guys think? I think this story is fascinating, and I think we could go on a deeper dive into it. I think there's so many turns and corners, witnesses, accounts, skepticism, critic, and that's what makes a great story, though. So, listen, I encourage you to do your own research. I just took some of the articles that I had read and just my knowledge over the years. It's my favorite story, though. I'm not going to lie to you. I think that's what makes a good story, though, is you don't know what happened. You can continue to speculate all we want, and could they just be completely full of it? Yeah, could they have gone out there, said, you know what, we're going to try to make money, let's just completely BS the local population, go to the sheriff, and, we're going to pretend we got abducted by aliens. We're going to sell this thing. We're going to make money off of it, and that's what we're going to do. I don't think that's the case. But also, how fantastic and terrifying and creepy is the story that's given. Two guys in the middle of the night, in the dark, in Pascagoula, blue light envelopes them. At night, they're on board a ship, 3 aliens that by all pictures that they've drawn of it look scary as hell. Takes them aboard this ship. A giant eyeball examines them. I would absolutely freak out. Anybody would who's getting abducted by an alien. They're dropped back. All right, they freak out. They go to they try to get in touch with the Air Force Base. They try to talk to the sheriff without ridicule. They're recorded. They think that they're going to catch these guys lying, and they're not. They believe they saw something. Something happened to them. Most experts agree something happened. That they were, and it's not just one person who had a panic attack, a mental episode. This is 2 guys. Recordings, same. They believe it. And then you have several witnesses who believe they said they saw a blue light in the sky that night. So where's the truth at in this? For me, it's somewhere in the middle. I think it's closer to something happened. Something extremely crazy happened. But, if they pulled the wool over our eyes for 50 years, then they did a damn good job, because that's a lot to go for in something. I think if it truly was just a hoax, I think holes would have been poked in it relatively quickly, and it never would have made it to this point. So, guys, what do you think about the Pascagoula, Mississippi alien abduction? Email us, themidnightdreary@yahoo.com. You can check out our Instagram, comment on there. And what other alien abductions have you guys heard about that you think that there's some credibility to? Message that to me. Let me know. And again, welcome back to spooky season, guys. I'm excited to be chatting with you again. Reach out to me if you have any show ideas. We're going to be back next week with yet another episode of The Midnight Dreary. Thank you, guys, and have a good one.
Thanks for stopping by The Midnight Dreary. We'll be open again next week to serve up more drinks and more mysteries. Until then, safe travels.